Okay, Boker Tov. So today's daf is the last daf of Hagigah. We pick up in the middle of Chavav Amud Aleph, and we'll be seeing it to the end, to Chav Zayin Amud Aleph. Boker Tov, everyone. Mar Chazim Tov, I should also say. So we pick up the line Tana, Ne'amanim al Klei Cheres, Yerushalayim Ne'amanim al Kodesh. So it is, where is it? It's it's about 15.
Four lines before the last mission.
No, the second to last. No, like there are three Mishnahs there. It's very confusing. They're about 15 lines down in the wide lines, okay? The word Tana appears at the end of the line right after two dots. Okay. So this is talking about special circumstances in which we believe people. So we've already found out that we believe Kodesh at all times, at least in Yehuda. We believe people about Truma at the time of the olive press and about the vessels of Truma relating to Truma even 70 days at the time of the pressing of the olives and grapes, the vessels even 70 days before. And then about Klei Cheres, we believe them even within 15 mil from Modi'in and Lifnim around Yerushalayim. We believe people who are coming and returning objects, ganavim, tax collectors, what they did and didn't touch. A lot of cases where we're believing people. Now we get to the line which says, and in Yerushalayim nemanim al Kodesh. In Yerushalayim, they're always believed relating to Kodesh, which is similar to what we said, except here saying Yerushalayim before we said Yehuda. So that's a little strange, why it seems to be more limited, and we'll see that in the Gemara. And on the Regel, everybody is believed, even on Truma, even though it's not the time of the pressing of the olives and the grapes. So let's take a look at that. Tana of Yerushalayim ne'amanim al Kodesh. Tana ne'amanim al Klei Cheres gasim lekodesh. So as opposed to within 15 mil of Yerushalayim from Modinu Lifnim, they're believed on the small and the thin vessels, or maybe not small, it was discussed before, but at least, like the non-major vessels, the thin ones, the more regularly used ones, they're believed even from 15 mil in Yerushalayim proper, they're believed on all vessels that are made, all Kli Cheres, that are made for the purpose of Kodesh. So as opposed to, right, when it's talking about actual wine and oil that people say are Kodesh, then they're believed even anywhere in Yehuda. But in terms of the vessels that are made for that purpose, they're believed in Yerushalayim. Since you don't make kilns in Yerushalayim, so therefore there's a greater need. So you have to go ahead and buy it, in the industrial area, like in the outskirts of Yerushalayim and so on, as we said before. And therefore there's a greater need to believe people. And again, here, therefore, policy dictates that we'll have greater believability. Not exactly clear what the difference is between the thin ones, which are believed outside Yerushalayim, and the big ones only in Yerushalayim. But it seems at least that a basic difference is that the small ones are a much more like a regular use, and everybody uses them, and they're used much more commonly. There's a much higher demand, a much greater amount of them, and therefore there has to be, you believe even to a greater extent, even outside Yerushalayim, where there's less of a demand, so therefore only in Yerushalayim proper. And now really getting to what's going to be the emphasis of the end of this Mishnah, of the end of the parak, and really a lot of what the whole parak was about, is that at the time of the Regel, all of these distinctions fall away, and everybody is believed, even on Truma, Minani Mili. Now, as opposed to saying, if you would have sort of said similar maybe to a point said before, well, maybe it's to give Kohanim an opportunity to receive Truma, the same way we believe people in particular at the time of the at the pressing of the olives and of the grapes. And Rashi said, because that's the major time when the olive oil and the wine is being produced, and therefore the major time that Truma is being distributed, and you don't want the Chaverim to be excluded from receiving Truma, then you might have said, well, maybe sometimes people will wait till Aliyah L'Regel to distribute Truma and everybody's going to be around. You could have given maybe some other type of a policy like that, but here we find that the policy in place actually is much less about receiving Truma and what you're getting, and much more about creating a sense of unity amongst Bnei Yisrael. So let's take a look. Minani Mili, I'm Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi Damakra, because the verse says, "Vayasov kol ish Yisrael el ha'ir kish echad." Everybody gathered to the city as one man, as one person, chaverim, as friends. So it's a little cute little play on words. So you see, the Torah called them all chaverim, because they were all like the status of a chaver. Well, but basically the point being that at the time of Aliyah L'Regel, where the whole idea. No, the verse is not talking about them being chavers. That was the concept.
No,
That's what I believe it was regular. Yes. So the point is though that that you see that the whole point of Aliyah Regel, right, is that everybody comes up. I mean, although it is interesting, by the way, to think at the beginning of the Masechet, it's worth remembering. In the beginning of the Masechet, we learned about all the people that were exempt from the Regel, from Aliyah Regel, right? Any non-males, any people with various types of other issues. So in a way, that way was creating essentially certain types of divisions, at least who had to come, not necessarily who was allowed to, but who had to. At the same time, the Yerushalmi, and I'll remind you, said that while those exemptions applied to people to who was obligated to bring a korban, they did not apply to the idea of being Ola L'Regel. The Yerushalmi actually understood that everybody was obligated to be Ola L'Regel, men and women regardless, and they learned it out from Hakel, because by Hakel it says, it says that when you do Hakel, it says you do it after Chag HaSukkos, Ba'alot Ko Yisrael. Right, when all of Israel comes up in order to appear before God, it says Hakelas Am Hanashim V'Nashim V'Taf. So there it says that everybody has come up, and then it says gather everyone, men, women, and children. So the Yerushalmi learns from there that the actual Aliyah L'Regel is done by everybody, no distinctions, men, women, and children, no distinctions at all. The Bavli never actually said that in an opening Tosfos in the Masechet, and proved from various places in the Bavli that the Bavli would not agree with that, and nevertheless. And wait, I should also mention one other interesting irony. You might remember that the other persons that were excluded from Aliyah L'Regel, according to the Bavli, were people that were extremely smelly. Remember that? People that had very smelly occupations because they could not come up, tanners, together with the rest of Israel. Nobody would want to go up with them. People wouldn't want them as part of the group. So in a way, the beginning of the Masechet opens up with the sense of, well, you got to get people together, but only certain people, and other people can't be part of that group, right? Other people you wouldn't want them to be a part of you. And the end of the Masechet ends by saying that at the time of Aliyah L'Regel, we're doing everything we can to create a sense of unity, and in order to even the normal stratifications of society, of the Amei Aretz and the Chaverim and all of that, we are completely dealing away with the Regel, because just imagine you have all of Klal Yisrael there, and everybody is sort of guarded and protecting themselves from everybody else, and don't touch my thing, and I don't know who you are, and I don't know if you're Chaver and Amei Aretz, and so on. And all of a sudden, right, especially like it's one thing in your normal when you're at home and you know who's who, then at least you can naturally navigate. Here, there's thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people. You'd have to avoid everyone. So Dafka, what they do at this time is, as contrasted from the distinctions at the beginning of the Messiah, here we completely eradicate the distinctions to create this sense of unity. Yes, you're going to tell me the context wasn't Regel. What?
In a beautiful irony, the context be like give.
Oh, really? Okay. Okay, that's very nice. So it's not the right context. The Yerushalmi, I think, has another pasuk, which is Yerushalayim Ir Shechubra La Yachtav, that everybody is Nasa Chaverim. So that has more to do with the idea of Yerushalayim. In Yerushalayim, everybody is friends. Yeah.
I want to ask a general question about Rashi, on specific Rashi.
Yeah.
Right. There's She'enosim Kivshonot Yerushalayim. See that Rashi?
Yeah.
Right. Lo Dakim v'lo Gasim. Right.
Yeah.
Then he goes Umihu. It's very typical, right? Umihu B'Dakim Hutrach LeAnshei Yerushalayim v'Chaf Yachid v'Yachid, etc. How does he know that?
Well, he doesn't know it.
In other words, can I assume that that's a Masorah he got from his
No.
He's
trying to. I mean, sometimes he says kach shamati or whatever, but he's just trying to reconcile a problem. Like if there's this need to believe people about kli cheres, why is there a difference between big ones and small ones, and in Yerushalayim and outside Yerushalayim? So he's speculating. He's giving a reason.
So oftentimes, basically, it's his svara that we're relying.
Yeah.
On. It's a Rishon.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. You don't have any general sense how much of Rashi he's taking from the Zohar and how much he's figuring out himself. I don't think there's any way of
really
assuming which is what.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're saying that according to Yerushalmi, it's allowed only believe in Yerushalayim, according to Bavli, it's as long as they're gathered together.
That's an interesting question because Yerushalmi, the Bavli does mention Shas HaRegel, it's a question interesting in the Mishnah whether you read it. It would be Yerushalayim. Does B'Shas HaRegel go on Yerushalayim? The sense always is that we're talking within Yerushalayim, not like for the few people that were left behind, because the whole point is everybody is gathering together and everybody's gathering together in Yerushalayim. But it's an interesting point, right? Because I understand. I don't think so. It's a good point, right? I've always assumed it's Yerushalayim. It's partly how you read that Mishnah, but that's what I'm taking for. That's what I'm assuming. Okay, now let's take a look. So now you're going to have interesting questions because if you believe B'Shas HaRegel, what happens after the regel. There you are, you're a store owner in Yerushalayim. You open up your store, right? You're not going to stand guard and make sure, that's part of the whole reason for this policy, right? Anybody can come in and can touch things, and maybe they want to taste a little bit of the wine, so they take a little cup and they do a little wine tasting, and whatever, and then they wind up touching things. So fine, during the regel, you don't have to be concerned who's who, and everybody can trust it, and everybody can assume it's tahor, and all of that. Now, what happens after the regel, and you have a half-open barrel of wine? What do you have to assume, right? Remember, now that might seem absurd that the status would change, but you might remember before, right? The same guy who was selling the pictures, when he's within Modi'im, he's believed. When he's outside of Modi'im, the same guy in the same pictures, he's not believed.
Close these
right?
up and you open them up again next year.
Well, I guess you could do that, but you also had a similar thing exactly about the stuff about the people during the time of the pressing of the wine. If you can't deliver it during the time of the pressing of the wine, you're believed. If you come late, you're not believed, right? So maybe here the status will change. On the other hand, there was already a ruling about this particular barrel. So let's take a look. So you opened up your barrel. So you began making bread. Agav haregel, wherever you sort of started, distributing dough from the bread during the regel. Rabbi Yehuda omer yigmor. Rabbi Yehuda says even after the regel, you can finish it. You can assume it remains tahor, because you won't want to start selling it and during the regel if it's going to have to be tamei after the regel. The Chachamim say you cannot. So the Gemara says, it changes status. Yosef, Rav Ami, Rabbi Yitzchak Nafka, Akil, Rabbi Yitzchak Nafka. So Rav Ami and Rabbi Yitzchak Nafka were sitting on like the porch of Rabbi Yitzchak Nafka. Patachad v'amar. One of them opened up and said, Moshe yanichena l'regel achir. You see that, Rabbi Dov? They were taking their cue from you. All right. So according to the Chachamim, that lo yigmor, can you do like what you did with the wine that was pressed during Shas Hagitot and just wait until the next regel?
By the way, this is for truma.
That's why would you most be concerned? It could be for people that eat their chulin bit atara satruma, but basically, the most concern is truma. Okay, but if you're selling a barrel of wine, presumably you're not selling truma, so it applies to chulin as well. Okay, it applies to everything. So let's take a look. So, what's the story? So, so everybody is handling it, and you're saying wait till the next regel. Meaning, let's give me a break. Once it's no longer the regel, we have to resort to revert to what we know is our real concerns, which is it probably is tamei. So even if we were willing to suspend that during the regel, we cannot suspend it after the regel. Okay, of course, but so what? But during the regel, you do suspend it. So Amalei, says, I don't get it. So what? During the regel, also everybody is handling it, but you're willing to suspend those concerns. So suspend it when the next regel runs around. Amalei hachi hasli says, what are you talking about? Until now, tumasam art beregel rachmanatira. The Tumah of an Aretz. Now notice the phrase. The Torah was mita'aret, right? Because it quotes a pasuk vayesov kol yishuah, which isn't in the Torah, and as was pointed out, it's talking about pilegage begiven, isn't directly relevant. But and all these chumras are, rabbinic chumras. But nevertheless, maybe because it was felt so deeply problematic, that mamish, you believe everybody about everything or whatever, invoking the authority of the Torah. The Torah made it tahor. Let's finish. No, it does mean Torah. The Torah made it tahor. So there we understand. Elahashta tmeahi. But once the regel is over, it gets a status of being tamei. During the regel, it never got that status yet. It was considered tahor. But as soon as that passes, it becomes tamei. So nema. So therefore, there's no way it can go from tamei to being back to being tahor. It's a way that state can be suspended or can be prevented. But once that state takes effect, it's going to remain in that status. What's interesting about this is, you sort of understand the point being made that once we acknowledge the problem, we can no longer ignore it. Once we acknowledge Amayaretz touched it, they were probably tamei, we have to treat it as tamei, you can't go ahead and ignore that. The difference, presumably the difference like before, like the issue about at the time of the pressing of the olives and so on, was that was considered to be a period when people would make an effort to be mitaher everything. So there at least there was some type of a fact pattern, there was some type of a basis of an argument we can make why maybe it really is tahor. So it would not be so bad to say, okay, the period of the pressing passed, we can't trust it. When the period comes back, we can't trust it, because at least there's something we can rely on. Here, there's nothing we can rely on. It's not an assumption that, everybody is mitayar themselves, although you might have wanted to say that, people mitayar themselves for regel, but for some reason, that's not being said. And therefore, and as long as we sort of suspend that, live in what they call that? When you're supposed to read fiction, a state of suspended disbelief. When we live in a state of suspended disbelief, okay, we're okay. But as soon as we pull out of that, and it's after the regel, we acknowledge that all the Imamayats touched it, and there's no reason to think they're tar. We have to treat it sameh. He says there's no reason we can go back and treat it as tahor again. Okay, so that is, you understand where he's coming from. What is interesting is, again, number one, the contrast to when we do exactly that, like in the case of the time of the pressings of the oil and of the wine. And what's also interesting is the phrase of Rahmana Tira, which again, we have first time we're introducing, treating it as if it's doraisa. So all of this is Rabbanan. But I think that's partly because it's so shocking that we're going to be so lenient that you're sort of invoking the authority of the Torah. Yes.
You have a situation with chazaka where you have a certain set of facts, and despite the fact, right now the Nehru falls down in a hurricane, and you see it. You don't tell everybody else, and you allow them to continue to use
No, that's not true.
It's not true.
No, that's not true. That's not true. I mean, there might be a reason you don't tell people because mutav you shogegim.
Yeah.
But that's different. Okay, but you know what? First of all, two things. First of all, you can bring a korban without appearing in the base of mikdash. Second of all, right, the types of tum and tar that they're concerned about here, I mean, it's interesting, right? Yeah, I mean, it is true. If you want to appear in the Beis Hamikdash, you'd have to be tahor. So,
can we say there's a role people appearing in the Beis Hamikdash?
Yeah, but I mean, first of all, it's for the entirety of the regel. So after you've brought your korban, right, we continue to assume that you're being so careful and scrupulous and so on. And remember that when it comes to Kodesh, we believe people more because we don't want to exclude people from the Beis Hamikdash. So we've always sort of operated that way, Now, again, you could say, well, once you're, that's part of the logic here. Once you're accepting them to come into the Beis Hamikdash, it is interesting, so living in different modes. But anyway, it just felt that it was very hard to sustain this. Okay, so the Gemara says like this. Name a kitanai. Let's say this is based on the debate of Tanaim. The Tani Chada, one Braita says, Yanichen el regel acher. The Tani Idach, lo yanichen el regel acher. So you see, there's exactly this debate. My love, Tanai. You see, it's a debate of Tanaim, whether you can leave it to the next regel. Lo, the Gemara says, Hadik Tani yanichen, leave it to the next regel, Rabbi Yehuda. That's Rabbi Yehuda who says that you can finish it. Of course, the question is, why do you have to leave it? We'll get to that. Hadik Tani lo yanichen, don't leave it. Rabbana, that's the rabbis who say that it's no good after the regel and remains no good. Someone says, V'tispar, does that really make sense? Ha Rabbi Yehuda yigmar kamar. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't need you to leave it to the next regel. He says you can finish it immediately. You can keep on eating it afterwards. So Ella Hadik Tani, fine, we'll reverse it. Hadik Tani lo yanichen, when it says don't leave it to the next regel, Rabbi Yehuda. That's Rabbi Yehuda, and we're going to say what that means is you don't have to leave it to the next regel. Hadik Tani yanichen, when it says leave it to the next regel, Rabbanan, it's the rabbis. Umay lo yanichena. What does it mean? Don't leave it. Shein tzarich lahanicha, that you don't have to leave it to the next regel. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you can finish it right away. But either way, what we see is there is one opinion that says yanichena, you can leave it to the next regel, which would make it like the wine and the oil that you press b'shas hagitot. And there's a question what the other opinion means. But at the simple sense, it does seem that this is exactly a debate of Tanaim. How much does this parallel what we've seen by the issue of the shas hagitot? Okay, so that's in terms of trusting everybody about Truma. Michael raises good questions that in general they're trusted to bring Korbanot and Kodesh and so on. But as we've known, we're always more machmir in terms of Truma, and here during the time of the regel, we are not. Misha Avar HaRegel. So that's in terms of food that they've handled. But now we're going to take sort of look at something even more shocking, which is their possible touching of the kelim of the Beis Hamikdash. Let's take a look. Misha Avar HaRegel, once the regel is over, Ma'avir al Taharas Azara. You take out all the vessels from the Azara, from the temple courtyard, and you immerse them. Avar regel Yom Shishi. Now, if the regel is over on a Friday, Lo Yamarvim Dekvod Shabbat. You would not do it because of Shabbos, because Shabbos is coming, and you're going to now do a whole major process of immersing all the vessels, and you're not giving anybody Kohanim the time to go get ready for Shabbos and everything. It's all very rushed. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Aflo Yom Chamishi. Even if the regel is over on Thursday, you wouldn't do it. Shein Kohanim Pnuyim. That even starting Thursday, people are busy, and you're not giving them time to prepare for for Shabbos. Now, not only that, if you look at Rashi, he says another reason why they specifically don't have time. He says, b'motzei Yom Tov latpilam, they don't have time to immerse them on Thursday. Shetrudim lahotzi yadeshen shal hatapuach. Right? So they bring all these sacrifices, the entire regel. You're getting a huge mound of ashes. So a major thing they had to do, Motzei Regel, was take out all the ashes. So that's their major activity, Motzei Regel. That's going to take up a lot of Thursday. So you can't, and then by Friday already, you have to get ready for Shabbos. So in that case, you would wait till the next week.
That's
So
the Gemara itself, right?
You're right. Rashi is just thank you. You're right. Next line of the Gemara. Tana shena kunam pnuyim lahotzi badeshen. Right. Thank you very much. It's a long sugya. Thank you. Okay. Forgot that. It's been 2 days since I learned this Gemara. Okay. Anyway, so right. So there you go. But what's fascinating here is two things. One is the shocking idea that we assume the Kalim and the Azar became Tameh, which we're going to talk about how they touching them. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But the other thing is, if we're assuming that they became Tameh, we're not then during the regel we're not worrying about it, or we're concerned but not concerned during the regel. We're suspending that concern. So during the regel we're not worried about that. But even after the regel, if it's going to be too rushed because it's Friday or maybe even Thursday, we're going to continue to suspend those concerns for 2 to 3 more days, right? For Thursday, Friday, and Shabbos. We'll only start bringing them to the mikvah on Sunday. So during the regel, there's a possibility apparently that an Amaretz touched the Kalim of the Beis Hamikdash. How that happened, we'll see in a minute. But we're going to suspend that concern during the regel, and we're going to continue to suspend it, maybe even in 1 or 2 or 3 days more, until we get a chance to immerse the vessels. But now we're going to really have to look at this fascinating issue about how is it that an Amaretz might have touched the Kalim of the Beis Hamikdash. Yes, very good.
Didn't we say that? I think you remember Rashi that it's a Gnai. That Rashi there was somewhere.
I don't know. Okay, Kate said, anyway, we did it here. Kate said, Ma'avir Naltaras Hazara. What would this mean that we would remove the Kalim to immerse them? Okay, Matabilin, as a Kalim, Shaya B'Mikdash, you would immerse the vessels that were in the Beis HaMikdash. The Omim Lahem, and you would say to them, now not when you were immersing it, this is during the Regel, you would say to the people, Izaharu Shelo Tiku B'Shochan. Be careful not to touch the shulchan. Now, this is crazy. Who are you telling to be careful not to touch the shulchan? The shulchan's not only in the Azara, right? The shulchan's in the Heichal, right? So here you have your Beis Hamikdash. Here's your Ulam. Right?
Yeah.
Right. I'm just trying to get my directions right. Okay. So here's your menorah. Here's your shulchan. Right, here's the Kurdish production. I would just have that. Okay. Right. There's your Mizbeach. Fine. Okay. Anyway, and here's this. Now, where were Yisrael normally allowed? Yisrael were normally allowed in about 11 amos here, right, of the Azara. These were the gates of the Azara. That was Sharnik. Okay. This was the Ezra's Kohanim, right? Where only Kohanim generally could go. Right. And then in here, right, nobody could go unless they had to. So the only people that would go in here would be the person, the Kohanim, and B, the ones that were arranging the bread of the shulchan or lighting the menorah, right? So who the heck is touching that? So maybe you could say it's like a Kohen Ama Aretz. But there's not too many people that get to go in here, okay? 2 or 3 maybe, right? On a Shabbos, they switch the bread. So you have a few daily, they do the menorah. We're getting there, Michael. Don't ruin the surprise, okay? But anyway, so you only have Kohanim, and maybe you have, how many Kohanim go in here? You burn the Torah, so light the menorah, like 1 or 2 a day. Okay, so who is touching? You're going to let a Kohen Amaretz go in there? Who is touching the shulchan? Why is it?
The Duchan for the Levim? It's to the west of the Nicanor?
Yeah.
On the other side of the
No, it's like here.
There.
Okay, anyway. All right. So that's sake. So the Gemara says like this. Shaloti go shochan. Don't touch the shochan. And we're going to see the reason that they were so concerned about the shochan is because that they could immerse all the other vessels, but they couldn't immerse the shochan. Because the shochan says lechem panim lefanai tamid, that it always has to be in front of God, so you cannot move it. So that's the one vessel they couldn't immerse. Kol hakelim shayu b'mikdash yesh lem shneim v'shlishim. All the vessels in the Mikdash had, seconds and thirds, had replacements. That if some became Tameh, they would just use the backups. Kola kelim shay, except for the well, we'll see the shofar. Kola kelim shay b'mikdash tunim tvila. All the vessels, if they became tamei, had to be immersed. Chutz mizbeach hazav, mizbeach hanachoshes, except for the gold altar and the copper altar. The gold was inside, the copper was outside. Mitnei shein kikarka, because they are considered like they're attached to the ground, and therefore they do not become tamei. Rebbe Lezer, that's what Rebbe Lezer says. V'chamim mitnei shein mitzupin, because they are coated in metal, which is bizarre because that should make them something that's coated in metal. Metal is more susceptible to becoming tamei, so it's not clear what the Chachamim are saying. We'll see in the Gemara. Let's take a look at the Gemara. Tana. So we've done a brisa. They said not just be careful not to touch the shulchan. They also said don't touch the menorah. Presumably the menorah was something that you also could not be tovel. Okay, Vitana Didan, my time a tani menorah. And why did our Tana not teach the menorah? Apparently, according to our Tana, you could be tovel the menorah. So the Gemara says shulchan ksiv ba tamid. Shulchan it says lechem panim lefanai tamid. So therefore, the shulchan you could not move, and that was the issue. But menorah loksiv batamid. The menorah doesn't say tamid. Now Rashi says it does say tamid. It says by the menorah. It says lalos near tamid, but that's only during nighttime. So there's no tamid during the daytime. The menorah only has to be burning during the night. So therefore, right, if you take a look at Rashi, Kolomar tamidim amurim b'menorah lo tamid yomam v'layla kamar ela tamid milayla l'layla ki tamid amur ba'olat tamid b'chavit ikon gadol avol b'lom lo hayal dolek me'ervad boker ksiv. Okay, so therefore, since the menorah was only the tamid of the menorah was at night, not in the day, but the tamid of the shulchan was at all times. So so what would the other one say? The menorah opposite the shulchan. So the same way the shulchan has to always be there, the menorah has to always be there. No, that's to say that it's got a fixed place opposite the shulchan, but it doesn't say that it has to always be there. Okay. So basically, we have the idea that don't touch the things that we're not allowed to be tovel. That certainly is the shulchan. It might be the menorah. Okay, we still don't know how the heck anybody is getting access to this to touch it, but you got to be really careful not to touch the things we're not allowed to be tovel. The kokli eitz asul linachas lo matame. So now the Gemara says, I'm sorry, I skipped a line. So the Gemara says, why do you have to be concerned about not touching the shulchan and therefore because you won't be able to immerse it? The shulchan is a wooden vessel, okay, ignoring that it's covered with gold, but it's basically wooden, and therefore any wooden vessel that is made to remain in its place is like something attached to the ground. It's not matami. Like think, for example, I know this isn't wood, but think, for example, like your refrigerator. Do you consider your refrigerator a vessel, or do you consider it like part of the apartment? You know, so something that's big and heavy, and when it's full, it stays where it is. You know, that is something that is not considered a vessel. It's considered essentially attached to the ground, and it's not matami. Okay, so therefore the Gemara says, isn't that true by the shulchan? And therefore, why do you need to be concerned that it be touched and you're not allowed to move it, etc.? It shouldn't become tummy anyway. Any wooden vessel made for remaining in its place, lo matame, it does not become tummy. My time, what's the reason? You need similar to a sack, because the Torah speaks about a sack being tamei. Masak mitaltel maliv rekam, the same way a sack can be carried empty and full. Only something, at least wood vessels that are carried empty and full, are things that can become tamei. But something that cannot be carried full cannot become tamei. So the Gemara says, oh, you know, and now this can, now by the way, there's not only cannot, but more like is not. The phrase is asui lenachas, made for the purpose of being in its place. Okay, so a shulchan, the Gemara says, look, it's like a little circular. You're saying, don't touch the shulchan because we won't be able to move it to immerse it. So the Gemara is saying, but because you're not allowed to move it, that should mean that it can't become tamei. You can touch it because you're not allowed to move it, right? It is asur l'nachas. So it doesn't just mean something that is not able to be carried full, but it means something that is not carried. You know, either you're not able to when you fill it up, it's too heavy, or something that maybe you're able to, but in principle, you always leave it exactly in its space. Okay, so that's the type of thing. Like again, imagine, I don't know, you had a big what are those things called? Those like those things are armoire, those things that they have for like those chests of clothes, those big scanning things, right? So okay, in theory, maybe you could carry it, but that thing stays there. It's made to be in its place and to stay there, right? So that would be considered not matame. So that's the shulchan. It's meant to stay there. It's tamid. So exactly because you're not allowed to move it, should mean it shouldn't become tamid. So let's take a look. So hanami metaltel melev reikamu kid Reish Lakish, like Reish Lakish says. The Amar Reish Lakish says, "My deceive." What's meant by the verse al shulchan hatahor, that it says that you should put the bread on the tahor shulchan. So michlal shu tamei. You gotta love the Gemara when it does things like that. It says the tar shulchan, which means it's tamei. So not literally means it's tummy. It means that if it's able to be tamei, if it has to tell you that it's tahor, so of course the natural way to read it might be it's always tahor. No, but then you won't have to say it. So it's saying tahor. It means that it's possible that it could be tamei. How can it possible it could be tamei? I thought it has to remain in its place. So the Gemara says like this. So why is that? It's a vessel that's made for remaining in its place. The eino mekabel tuma, and it does not become tamei. Elam lamed, it teaches you shemagbino, so you lift it up, and you show it to the people that are coming up for the regel. Lechem hapanim, that they can see the lechem hapanim. V'omim lam, and you say to them, look at how beloved you are to God. Siluko kisiduro, that the bread remains warm a week later when it's removed, just like when it's put on. The Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, let me read a little. Nes gadol na'aseh b'lechem hapanim, an amazing miracle is done with the bread. Kisiduro kach siluko, that the same way when they put it up, it was fresh and warm. When they removed it, it was just as fresh and warm. Shenemar lasum lechem cham biyom hilakcho, to put warm bread like in the day of its removal. So just like when it was put, it was warm. When it was removed, it was warm. Now, so they did lift it up. It was not that they kept constantly remained it there. Now, where did they put it? They went to show the people. Where did they show the people? So here's the thing, okay? There is all the gates here are open opposite one another, right? The gate of the Shar Niknur, the gate of the Ulam, the gate of the Heichal, even the gate of the Kodesh Kodashim. I'll remind you, if anybody wants to hear about this, I gave a share on it. I sent out, I think, a link. Right, that on the regular they would even push aside the curtain here and push aside all these curtains so that the people could see straight in. Now, how they could see straight in with the mizbeach there in the way might have to be a question of exactly where the mizbeach was situated. There's a machlokas where the mizbeach was situated. Okay, so anyway, it would be possible, and they would actually let them see. I mean, it's completely like shocking. It's like scandalous. The whole thing is that it would only be the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur can have entry, and after the Gemara says that they would make it available at least to see by the people by pushing all the curtains aside. So if you want to hear more about that, go listen to my shir. But here, what we're saying is that they would show the shulchan. Now, where would they show the shulchan to the people? So it's possible all they would do would be to lift it up and put it down in the center, so that at least people could see it through a state line. Okay, maybe that's all that's happening, but of course then you still don't understand who's not touching it. Where is there concern of people touching it? The Gemara never spells that out. So it's possible that the only people they're concerned are touching it are Kohanim Am Haaretz. If you look, that's what Rashi says. Rashi says, where's Rashi? V'omim lahem on the Amud Aleph, the Kohanim Am Haaretz. So he thinks it's only a problem of the Kohanim. But even according to Rashi, like I said, like how many Kohanim get to go in here each day? What is it? Lighting the menorah and burning the Ketorah. So let's make sure those Kohanim aren't the Am Haaretz Kohanim. So okay, maybe they were very popular during the regal and let them go in. It's possible. But one does wonder if they're trying to show it to the people, how far did they actually move it? Now I have to admit, the language does say, right? It says that they were saying Magbiim Oso. So Magbiim doesn't suggest that they were transported very far. But one does wonder, would they even actually go bring it all the way out to actually show the people? And is that possibly how the people could come in contact with it? Okay, that would be, I acknowledge that that's not clear in the Gemara. The simplest thing in the Gemara is that it just means that it moved it a little bit. Also, since it says Lifanai Tamid, presumably Lifanai means that it has to remain within the Heichal. Presumably to take it out of the Heichal, would no longer be the tamid problem. Not only take it out to go to the mikvah, but presumably it has to remain in the heichal. So presumably all it means was that it would be moved center. But there still is a big question of who are you afraid is touching it.
And how do you even
The
see the
same
mace
way-
then?
What?
And how do you even see this mace if you just move it 3 feet? I mean,
Oh, that's a good point too. You mean how do they see that it's warm?
Yeah.
I don't know. Fresh bread you can smell, but like a good question. I don't know.
After a week?
You can smell it that far. That's a good point too, right? Who is looking at it? So there really is an interesting possibility that they really got it somehow a lot closer to the people. I will also let you know, by the way, that on Sukkot, right, and this is another way in which the Chazal gave the people much more access than you would normally imagine, is on Sukkot they would do Hakafa of the Aravos. Now again, you could say that was just the Kohanim, but the simple pshat of the Mishnah is that they would do the Hakafa of the Aravos, that would be all of Yisrael, and that would they even go into the Ulam B'la Mizbeach, which is considered to generally be off limits even to Kohanim unless they have to go there. Okay, but if Yisrael is actually not just in the Ezras Yisrael, but in here and doing the Hakafs or whatever, you really wonder. It sounds like the people are getting a lot of close access to the Kalim of the Beis Hamikdash that they normally would not have, and that's why you would have to do this Tevila. So again, what this is showing is not just the idea of creating a sense of Achdus, like on the regel, everybody is one. We don't want to create divisions. We're going to treat everybody as tahor, and not just like, oh, we'll consider you tahor. Even if you're tahor, you're never allowed in there. But it's really a very different aspect, which gets back to the beginning of the Masechet, which is the whole idea of aliyah l'regel and re'iyah, yeir eko l'chorcha, right? As Pnei Hadon Hashem. So the idea of appearing before God, but as we discussed earlier there, the simple sense of the verse is not just appearing, but the pshat of the verse is yeir eko l'chorcha et pnei, to see. Seeing God. So how does one see God, right? Lo yirani adam b'chai. But obviously people are going up to the regel. They presumably want some direct encounter. They just don't want to appear and bring their korban. They're finally getting to see the Beis Hamikdash, which God is present. They want some sense of some encounter with God. And what the Chachamim are doing is that they are actually allowing, they're pulling aside the curtains, they're bringing the menorah into their vision, maybe bringing the menorah out, they're letting the people in, they're giving them, the shulchan, they're giving them a much greater sort of sense of encounter than normally, logically they should have been afforded. And it will not come as a surprise that the Tzdukim were very much against all of this. This was very much the Chazal and the Prushim and a real attempt to make the Mikdash accessible to the people, which really ties into the themes that we've been seeing here. You want to say something, Charlie?
I was going to say, also, Erev Pesach, they all over the place checking their
yeah, but there they were presumably within here. Here we really sort of see a much greater getting them closer in and getting the things that are inside closer out. Okay, more of that. Listen to the shir that I put out at Erev Yom Kippur. All right, so now the Gemara says like this. The Tepukle Mishum Tzipui. Okay, says the Gemara, but maybe it's tamei not because they would lift it up and move it. Maybe it could become tamei in theory. Obviously, they would. The whole point is to avoid that, but maybe it could become tamei in theory because it's coated with gold. That's not hashulchan v'aduf dulafki v'shenifchatu o shechipan b'shayish. If you have a table or a dulafki, which is some type of what does Rashi say it is? Kises, right? Some type of a folding chair that either have broken, or that they were covered, let's say, in marble. V'shir behem makom hanachas kosot. Marble, it does not become tamei, but there's enough of a space on it to put some cups, so some glasses. So tamei, it's tamei because it's still functional, and that much is still uncoated with marble, and still wood, and still functional. Rabbi Yehuda omer makom chanachas hachatichot. It has to have a place of putting like a piece of meat, essentially. Okay, so what do you see? You see, though, if you coat it with marble, it will change its status if it's completely coated, and that's to make it tahor. So how much more so if you coat it with metal, will it change its status to make it tamei? And metal vessels, even if they're made for staying in a place, become tamei. So maybe the reason the shulchan can become tamei is not because it's moved, but because it is considered to be metal. Maybe acacia wood, which is what the shulchan was made of, is considered very important wood. And even if coated with gold, it's still considered to be a wood vessel, not a gold vessel. That's a pretty funny idea, that the wood is more significant than the gold and makes the gold considered secondary to it. That's good for Reish Lakish, who says that this idea that coating changes the status of the wood vessel underneath is by a certain type of the wood that comes from overseas. But samim lo batili, but with a different type of a wood that's more important wood, let's say oak or something, then the coating would not change its status. So shapir, that's good. So maybe you could say that even the gold doesn't change the status of the shulchan, and the shulchan is still considered a wood table. El Reb Yochanan Damar Afilu b'klei misamim nami b'teili ma'igla meimer. But according to Reb Yochanan, who says that even with very important wood, it loses its status based on the covering. So the coating? What can you say? This should be considered a metal vessel, and that's why it's tamei, because it's a metal vessel, not because you move it. That's why it can become tamei. So the Gemara says, maybe there's a difference between whether the coating really is like a good solid one, or it is one that and really sort of stands by itself, or it is not. It's not really supported. Rashi, if you look at Rashi, Rashi says, so it's two interesting ideas. Number one, the coating is not like it'll. Now again, I don't understand. Normally, you assume coating, it means you actually layer it on. So really, it gets embedded in. Here it imagines it like it's a plate that gets hammered on, like nailed on top, like a separate plating that gets nailed on top of it. So if that's the case, maybe if it's not well layered on top and it could easily come off, it doesn't change its status. Of course, then we would have to imagine that the shulchan in the Torah, in the Mikdash, has a plating on it. I guess it's a difference between, has a plating that somehow could easily come off, which is
it's like the Aron Kodesh itself is 3 boxes.
According to that, right. That's some idea like that. Although how you would do that functionally by a shulchan, I have no idea. Anyway, the Gemara says like this, but Reish Lakish asks Reb Yochanan, does this idea that it changes the status only when it's a plating that really stands, or even a plating that can be removed? I can't even say that word. Levaz bizav. Oh my God, somebody say that word. What? Leviz bizav. I don't know. Anyway, okay, whatever. Or is it something that even only when it covers the sort of the edge of it, or even when it doesn't cover like the edge of it? How complete does the covering have to be? Amar Lei, and he said to him, it doesn't matter if the plating is sort of permanent or can be removed. It doesn't matter if it covers the sort of edge, the trim, or doesn't cover the trim. Anyway, the coating changes the status. So back to the point. Why do we have to say that the shulchan can become tamei because it gets moved? It could become tamei because it's metal. No, Shani Shulchan Drachmana Karye 8. The Shulchan is different because even though it normally halachically, top of Chazayin Amud Aleph, should have a status of a gold vessel, the Torah calls it a wooden vessel, and that halachically gives it the status of a wooden vessel. Hamizbeach 8 shalosh amot. Now, notice by the way they say Rachmanan as a pasuk in Yechezkel. Okay, the wood altar 3 amot gavoa v'arko shtei amot umiktotav lo v'arko v'kirotav 8. Okay, so that's about the mizbeach. But then it says v'diber alai zeh shulchan asher lifnei Hashem. So this is the table before God. Now you might want to be talking about the Mizbeach is like a table because we talk about offering up the sacrifices on God's table, right? Even when the Gemara speaks, by the way, I'll remind you about a Gemara that spoke about you bring an Ola to God and you bring the Shlami Hagigah for yourself. And it says Shulchan Chamale v'Shulchan Rabcha Rekam, right? Talking about bringing things on the Mizbeach as Shulchan Rabcha, your master's table. So anyway, that's simple sense of the pasuk. But the Gemara says pasuk b'Mizbeach v'siyim b'Shulchan. It opens in Mizbeach v'siyim b'Shulchan. So Rabbi Yochanan v'Yishlakish Shamichavayu. So it's funny. So the answer is essentially, so it's funny because now it's going to give a drash, but the point that it's trying to make is that because it opens with Mizbeach and ends with Shulchan, you see the Shulchan itself is considered 8. The same way it says Mizbeach 8, it's the Shulchan is 8. But then the Gemara just transitions to a drash on this. So Rabbi Yochanan v'Yishlakish Shamichavayu bizman shebeis hamikdash kayam Mizbeach mechaper al adam. When there was the Beis Hamikdash around, the altar would atone for people. Achshav shulchano shel adam mechaper alav. Now, a person's table is mechaper for him. Now, what does this mean? So Rashi says b'achnasas orchim, inviting guests, right? But of course, I'm sure we all had a Jewish mother's told us, no, don't. I can't sit on the table. It's like a mizbeach. Shulchan's like a mizbeach. So it's an interesting question, right? What does that mean? Does it mean inviting guests, or does it also mean getting back to a theme that I or a theme that I also brought in earlier in this Masechet about how the idea of the kedusha that we've been talking about, right? All of these levels of purity and holiness in the eating, which created all this sort of stratification within the society. That now that there's no mizbeach, the way we create kedusha in our eating is through making brachot and through washing our hands, and that becomes our sort of form of sanctified eating. So you eat it with a recognition of God, and you eat it sort of bringing God into it. So that sort of is. So that's like the transferring of that reality from the mikdash to our domestic situation, but it's also in a way that doesn't carry with it all of these divisions within the society. So I think it's worth noting, I don't know if that's necessarily the pshat there, but I'd like to say it is, but I think it's worth noting all the ways in which we are sort of countering all of the earlier divisions. We had the divisions by Aliyah L'Regel, who's exempt, and so on. We had the divisions that were created by the Tumah and the Tahara and all those Amma Aretz and Chaver concerns. And now we're getting at the end, and what we're sort of saying is that everybody is considered Tahor in the Regel. Remove all of those divisions. Everybody, is, when people are Ola L'Regel, the whole idea is that not like before, only people that would want to be in a group, everybody else, like the smelly people are outside, no, everybody is supposed to be seen as, pulled together as one. Everybody is sort of coming, the access to the mikdash, people are being brought in, the mikdash is being brought out, and that eventually, when there's no base on mikdash, ultimately the mikdash is brought into our homes, and all of these divisions go away. You don't need special access. It's in everybody's home. Doesn't create divisions in society. So it really is the whole sort of Chazal coming and creating that very sort of popularist or non-hierarchical, approach that comes, as a contrast to some of those realities in the mikdash. Very quickly, because we only have 10 minutes, and we have to finish the Masechet.
From what you're saying, the leveling of divisions is both horizontal in terms of top, Tumah and Torah, and vertical. You become more kohanic. You become more kohen-like. You have greater access to
right.
what only Kohanim had. It comes into your house. So it's elevating in a vertical sort of way as well
as division between the people. Yes. Right. Thank you for that. Yes.
So I was going to say is that we're not, even though we're totaling all the vessels, we're not saying that whatever was done on them was like, was
right. It's exactly the same way like we after the food we deal with after the regular.
The Rashi I was referring to was Lafayam Bet. It says
right.
So, but over here we're saying the vessels are tamei, but we're not saying that.
Only saying they're tamei after the mikdash, after the regular. We're not saying they're tamei. We're saying just in case. Yes.
They used the pasuk from Yehezkel again, and
yeah, fine. Okay, moving on. Every vessels had doubles. These except for it said, the altar. So we were discussing why the shulchan could become tamei. And there's, 2 reasons it shouldn't. It's made for being in its place and it should be metal. But we said, A, they would move it, and B, it was defined to be 8. But the 2 things that would not be able to come tamei were the altars, because they were connected to the ground. Okay, so let's take a look. Henki Karka is the language of the Mishnah. So the Gemara says, Mizbach HaNechoshes Tichsiv, Mizbach Adama Ta'aseli. So it's called Adama. So there, even if you would want to call it somehow metal, because it is Nechoshes, etc., and like we just said before, nevertheless, it's there. It really is like permanently and considered to be attached to the ground. Ta'aseli, Mizbach Hazav Tichsiv, HaMenorah VaHaMizbachot, the menorah and the mizbeach. Iskish mizbachos zelazeh. So the menorah is able to become tamei, but we're putting that aside. The mizbachot are connected, so the mizbeach has zahav on the inside. It's considered, although it is much more portable, is considered also to be considered part of the ground. The chachamim and the chachamim say because they're coated. So the Gemara says, Adarabba, even the mitzupininu mitamu. What do you mean? We just got through saying that if things are coated, they're more able to become tamei. So Ema the chamim mitami neishem mitzupim. Okay, so maybe it means they're disagreeing. They're saying the mizbeach itself could be tamei. Of course, one wonders, then what are you going to do? Take the mizbeach and dunk it in the, I don't know exactly what you would do. Now, the mizbeach, I should say, the mizbeach hanechoshet. You didn't have a mizbeach hanechoshet in the bayit, in the base of mikdash. You had it in, you had it in, what do you call it? You had it in the mishkan. I mean, there they made it out of basically out of plaster and whatever, and there it really couldn't become tamei. So then we're talking, because that was really mechuber lekarkin was all anyway stone or whatnot. But you were really talking about is what it was in the time of the mishkan. But here at least, what they would be saying is maybe you'd have to dunk the mizbeach hazav in the mikveh afterwards. So the Gemara says, The Ibai say, and if you want, you could say Rabban and Rebbe Lezer come. They're saying back to Rebbe Lezer. My daitcha. Why do you need to quote a pasuk that says that it's called karka? Mishum dimitzupin, because they're covered, and therefore you think, oh, they should be metal, but because I got a pasuk, I'm going to say that's like karka. No, their coating is considered secondary to them. You don't need a pasuk anyway. They would be, like we said before, like wooden vessels that are made for being in their place, and therefore it's a moot point anyway. So one way or the other, you need it. Either it's coated with metal and you need a pasuk to tell you that they're like karka, or you don't give weight to the fact that it's coated with metal. You consider it to be like a wood vessel, and therefore anyway they cannot become tameh. Okay, right. Everybody agrees they do not become tameh. Right. Okay, so right, fine. Right, fine. Okay, so moving on. Okay. I'm Rabbi Yavo, I'm Rebbe Lezer. Talmid Chacham, now we end with some Agadata. Talmid Chacham, ein or shel Gehenim sholetes behen. Talmidei Chachamim, the fire of Gehenim does not have dominion over them. Kal v'chomer misalamandra, a kal v'chomer from a salamander. Which they believed had magical properties, that the blood of it would sort of make you fireproof. Umas salamandra told us Eishi, the same way a salamander comes from fire, and hasach midama einor shaletes bo, and if you coated yourself with it, you would be fireproof. Fire would not have dominion over you. Talmid Chacham shekol gufanesh, Talmidei Chachamim, that their whole essence is fire. Tichsiv halo kol dvarai ke'eish num Hashem, so are my words like fire, says God. Halachas kama v'kama, how much more so are they protected from Gehenna? The fire of Gehenna has no dominion over the sinners of Israel. Even the sinners. And this is presumably the link because of the Mizbeach Hazav, or else what did the other thing have to do with what we were saying? The same way the gold altar had only a very, like the thickness of gold was only like the thickness of a dinar, right? Whatever that was, I don't know, it's like 2 millimeters, let's say. Nevertheless, and it has a fire on top of it, and nevertheless, it now the covering never got damaged, so the fire had no dominion over it. So the sinners of Israel that are filled with mitzvos like a pomegranate, even the sinners are filled with mitzvos like a pomegranate. That like a slice of a pomegranate is your temples. Don't read rakatech, ela rekanim shabach. Even those that appear to be empty among you, they're as filled with mitzvos like the seeds of a pomegranate. So halachas kama v'kama, how much more so will they be protected from the fires of Gehenna? And also Slikalach Seder Moed. So shkayach to everybody. It is very worth noting, by the way, that just to let one last point about this is that number one, the reintroducing here at the very end about Torah. So we're sort of left with, again, sort of the focus on Torah and mitzvos, as opposed to all of this, which was the focus again on the korbanot, which sort of led to these divisions. You'll also remember that the contrast to the aliyah l'regel, or the transition from aliyah l'regel, was being ola l'hakbil pnei rabo b'regel. Remember that whole story with the blind rabbi that they went to visit, and the whole fact that the blindness was an issue by aliyah l'regel, but dafka, then it becomes, when it's about Torah and being ola l'hakbil pnei rabo, again, something that really gives everybody equal access. So here it ends again with a Torah theme and with a mitzvos theme. Mitzvos also is universal. It's not about mikdash. It's everybody has access to mitzvos. And it really makes the point because it's saying we should treat everybody similar to the idea that even the Amei Haaretz, we treat tahor baregel, right? So even the Amei Haaretz, we normally do with tahor. Everybody, even the people you imagine, don't have any mitzvos, right? Those are even the reikanim shebachar malei mitzvos kirimon. So again, this aspect, which is completely democratizing it and really trying to embrace like all of Klal Yisrael and recognizing that sense of unity. And with that, we should, God willing, go into the next year and go into Sukkot, and we should all be able to be roa b'binyan beis hamikdash b'mehera b'yameinu.
Good open Orthodox conclusion.